Hello everyone, I'm happy to welcome you all. My name is Vlad Bagnuk, I'm a Community Marketing Manager at Developer Sure. Join our community of great developers to follow our job opportunities, activities and future webinars. Interested? Just respond to the webinar invite email or fill out the form on our webpage developersure.com. A recording of this webinar will be published on our LinkedIn page. And now, welcome the speaker of our webinar.
Hello. Nice to be with you. Okay, I think we are all good. Hope you can hear me well. So, this is my topic for today. State management in React, Redux versus hooks versus Jotai. And I will start with showing you my plan for today. So I'm going to have a short presentation. I'll try to be really quick with the presentation because what I'm actually interested in is showing you a little code. I'll be going quite slowly through the code so we can all understand what's going on. But as it says here, first I'm going to say a few words about Redux. I hope most of you know something about Redux. It would be quite useful to have, a little information on that. It will be easier to understand what I'm talking about. Then I'm gonna say a few words about hooks and can hooks be an alternative to Redux. Then I'm gonna say a few words about Jotai, which is actually I think it's really good alternative to Redux to organizing state management in React and in future maybe in other applications too. Then I'm going to show you code. I'm going to show you a few very little applications, and I will compare the code in the same code written in Redux with hooks and with Jotai. And after that, we're going to have a short summary. So let's go. First, as I said, Redux. So I'm going to go through pros and cons of Redux. And first pro of Redux is, I think everybody knows it. I think even people who are not front-end developers know what Redux is. It became really quite popular after, because React started as this really nice functional library to creating user interfaces, but it needed some state management. So Redux was actually the first library to become really popular, and first library to probably popularize a flags idea in React in front-end development. No other library got such popular. So this is a pro because you have a lot of answers on Stack Overflow. Everybody knows that you can ask anyone about help with Redux. The other pro is that you can quite easily organize data in your reducers because Redux will force you to do it. Because if you write your reducers poorly, it will be super hard to actually use Redux. So you need to think a little bit about your data architecture, which is good. It helps create maintainable applications for sure. The other pro is that in Redux, we have this model that you have a data kept in your reducer, and then you create actions, and only through the actions, through directly created actions, you can change your state. So it's just easy to follow. You always can more or less follow why your data changed, what action caused that, and that it just makes the whole model of React quite easy to think of. Time travel is quite nice. It's also a quite nice feature. I do not use it as always as I thought I would be, because when first I get to know Redux, I thought the time travel would be like the most useful thing. In fact, I use it very rarely, but it is really like if you need to debug some more complicated bunch, and collection of actions that happen one after another, it might be actually quite useful. The single state tree in Redux is really also might be useful because whenever something happens in your application, you know exactly how the state looks. So you can just go to your DevTools and open whole stage 3 and see, okay, this is the current state of my application. It is quite useful, and you can serialize, deserialize, save it anywhere. It's also quite useful feature. And as I said, it just has good mental model. And I think this is one of the most important part of Redux. It's easy to think about. And that's about that if it comes to pros of Redux. And then now I'm gonna tell you a little bit about cons, I think, about problems with Redux. So even though it has a great model to think of, the actions as strings part is really hard for me, because it's just whenever you know I call my action, I think, well, I would just like to write a function. I don't want to add this additional overhead, this boilerplate, or of typing, you know, my action name. It is kind of solved with Redux toolkit, and I'm going to tell you about it, but still it stays under the hood, and it just seems like unnecessary overhead from, you know, programmer's point of view. Like we already have functions, so why cannot we just use functions and, you know, debug functions and maybe connect our dev tools to our functions to keep the mental model, but just remove the boilerplate. And kind of regarding what I said, it seems like reinventing the programming. It doesn't, when you go through from pure JS, just, you know, writing your functions, creating some observables and observers and changing your data, to Redux, where you have just write your actions with these strings like separately, it seems like reinventing the programming, creating some new programming model in JavaScript. And from my experience, it's just super, in the bigger projects, it's really hard to actually write nice reducers. And of course, the answer might be, you know, you should just keep your reducers small, which is of course a good idea. But in practice, I've spoken with, you know, with some friends who already have extensive experience in React, and we actually, all of us came to the same conclusion, which is that's if you write huge applications, your reducers are becoming huge, ugly switch cases, and it's just not easy to scan. It's not easy to understand what's going on in your reducer. Tab code navigation, because as I said, if you write your actions as string and you write your switch cases, it's just, you cannot just, you know, jump to function, jump to implementation. It's because of this boilerplate, it's kind of harder to use your, you know, normal JavaScript navigation code tools when you use Redux. It's just not that easy. And reducers do not compose well. If you have two reducers and you need to, for example, you know, maybe not exchange data, but you need to create, or, you know, if one reducer needs data from another, you either have to recreate your structure, recreate your architecture, which might be costly, or you need to use some other solutions. You need to share the data through actions. You need to write funcs. It's just, they do not compose easy. And there is no built-in reactivity, which is also quite a huge cons, because as it's also connected with the poor composability of Redux, there is no easy way to just say, okay, when this part changes, please change this other part. And yeah, the other cons is there are poor solutions. Oh, I'm sorry, but there is someone has sound on, and I see some noise. I hear some noise, which makes it a little harder to speak. Okay, thank you. It's, yeah, nice. Noise is good, is away right now. Thank you. So whenever, for example, whenever you try to find a solution to, you know, easy form state management with Redux, the first answer is, you know, don't use Redux for if you are creating forms. Don't use Redux because, you know, it's a small local state and Redux should not handle it. So already you see that if you use Redux for some part of your application, you need to use or you should use some other solutions. Okay. this is also what I said about problems with reactivity. So if you want to go properly async reactive, you need to add a bunch of additional libraries, and it's hard to choose which one is actually suitable for your application. And this is maybe cons, maybe not so huge cons. There is no GC. So if you push some state to your user, it stays there until you clean it. So it makes it very easy to just take huge parts of your memory, and if you do not clean it, it might slow down the application in the long run. That's about it about Redux. And there is a solution to that. There is a Redux toolkit created, and right now Redux toolkit is officially Redux. People tell you to use Redux toolkit if you start with Redux. So I'm going to focus on it a little bit because they solve some problems, but not all of them. So what I said about the problems with navigation and creating the actions using strings. So you have action creators are created automatically for you. So it makes it just faster to create Redux actions. Many built-ins, many problems I told you about. Async functions are included. There are selectors included. There is this really interesting part, create entity adapter. And it might be my favorite part. It makes it really easier to handle your data. You keep your in your reducers to add data, remove data, select data. It's quite an interesting feature. I'm going to show you fairly later. You have immer built in, so you don't need to return. You don't need to create this huge, deeply nested object accessing code that you sometimes need in Redux. You can just update something like in normal JavaScript, and it's just easier. It's really easier than this huge nesting updates. There is React query built in, so it's also quite a nice solution to fetching data and keeping your data synchronized with server. That's about it. So a few things really fixed coming from Redux toolkit, but then it's just huge library, and learning whole Redux toolkit idea and what it can do, what it cannot do is really quite hard. It takes a lot of time because, as I said, it's a huge library integrating a lot of different ideas. And from my point of view, API is just really hard because they prefer configuration over composition. So instead of creating small parts in your application and composing them, you need to configure everything up front and then have your actions, your selectors generated for you, which is quite useful. But with this API, it's sometimes hard to understand what are you really doing. You need to create this huge configuration, and only after that discover what can you do with this configuration, with this configured object that you right now have. And still, what I would hope for Redux to do is just remove the string-based actions, but they are still kept under the hood. So this weird idea of reinventing programming and using string-based actions instead of functions just stays there all the time. So it's, we're moving forward, but we're keeping all the ugly stuff still inside, which is, well, not, I understand the decision because it's still Redux, but I think this is just not useful to be kept. There is no reason to keep it. And it still has poor composability. The connections, creating connections between reducers, sharing data is still hard. And because, as I said, Redux toolkit is even, it has more tools than Redux, than bare Redux. The tools are quite opinionated, so you don't learn, the stuff you learn in Redux toolkit is not that useful in other libraries. You just learn in other ecosystems, I should say. You just learn how to think via Redux, which is, also not that cool because you want to use your language as often as you can, and only if you cannot use the language, you want to put some library in. So I think it's just, they tried to fix it, and it's easier to use for sure, but it's still a huge library with hard to understand API, and I wouldn't, if someone would ask me, should they use, Redux today as a state management library? Right now, today, we really have better options already. So they could have done it really better, but they, for some reason, they didn't want. Well, at least that's my opinion. So, we have these problems with Redux. So maybe we should just, maybe we should just stay with hooks, because hooks are super easy. And, what I said, Redux is bloated, is huge, has weird API. Hooks have super easy API. You just say, okay, this is my value, this is my change handler, and please, I want to have some state. You have it done. No importing any stuff, just use state. And as I said, you just get hooks with React, so you are ready to use them once you. Okay, yeah. Ivan is writing about the recoil. I will be almost talking about the recoil. So yeah, Jotai is super close to recoil, but getting back to hooks right now. So hooks, you just get them with React. So once you install React, you can use them already, and no additional libraries, no additional bandwidth. It's super cool. What about reactivity? We kind of have, the use state and use effect connection. So we kind of have reactive possibilities. You can react to state changes fairly easy, but it's a poor man's reactivity, because use effect is, well, the dependency array works weird, because it's super easy with use effect to just put some state that you do not observe and desynchronize your application. So you kind of have reactivity, but it's just done poorly. That's what it is. Other libraries do it better. Other reactive libraries do reactivity way better than use state and use effect connection. What's really interesting, and this is incoming prose because it's not yet ready. It's I think it will be available soon in React, but soon we will have native handling of promises in React. So you will be just able to put your promise in your code, call use on it, and React will take care of taking the value from the promise and putting this in your components, which is, it will be super useful. I hope it will be super useful, but it's not done yet. What are the problems? Local state only. So we do not have, with hooks, you can use reducer, but it's just, like getting back to Redux, so not that useful. And still your reducers are local. So your hooks are connected to your components directly. There are no, with bare hooks, you just have local state. And you need to, if you want to pass data somewhere else, you need to, use prop drilling, which sometimes is cool, but sometimes if the component is deep enough, it's just not useful anymore to only pass props down to through your component tree. Yeah, as I said, this is just what I said. You kind of can use context, but use context has many issues. There are problems with updating data through use context. Well, it requires you to do more work than just, passing data through it, if you really want to create a sustainable solution. So you can use it to, to pass your data through your application, but there are problems with updating. It's not so performant, and you need to add some additional code to make it work properly. So I would strongly advise against using it as any kind of, real state management solution. It won't work properly. Yeah, so what I just said, it's really usable. So, after Redux and hooks, there is Jotai. And that's what I actually wanted to tell you about today, because Jotai is somewhere in between Redux and hooks. So first of all, as in hooks, it has that simple API. If you can write, Atom, you're basically done. You understand almost all of Jotai. right now. So this is a huge pro, and it's, you know, similar to hooks. It's super easy. There is super easy composition. So if you want to exchange data, if you want to connect your actions together, it's super easy. And I'm gonna have a look at the chat. Yeah, again, more specific arguments against using context. Sure, there is a question about context. So first problem with context, getting back to hooks, is that you need to be really careful about where you use context, because it's easy with context to make your application, to make a lot of components re-render when they do not need to, because values passed through context do not go through the normal process of this should component update. They are not treated like properties in React. They are treated like separately. So it's just easy to make more components update than you want, actually. And so this is the first thing. And the other thing is that you still, what context gives you, so the first, my argument against, is super easy to make context poorly performing. And what context gives you, you know, it gives you just, it's like having a global object that you can use in, you know, in the many different components. And but you still have just, you know, you can pass, for example, your use state through context, but it's still just, you know, use state is just a poor in the matter of whole application. Use state passed through use context, it's still poor solution to your state management, because there is, you just, there are no, it's not solving any, you know, async problems. It's not solving problems of composing data and composing your actions. So in my opinion, even if you use context carefully and make sure that only those components that you want are updated, it's still giving you a poor state management solution. So why would you use poor state management solution that is just do not have many features that you would like in your state management solution? So yeah, this is my second argument against it. It's, there is not enough good features to actually use it as a state management solution. There is no, yeah, thank you. Okay, yeah, so that is my answer, Jens. Thank you for the questions. Okay, so let's get back to Jotai. So the other pro of Jotai is super easy composition. So as I said, you can compose actions, you can compose data super easy. You can organize your data. Let me see what's the time. Okay, yeah, we still have some time. You can organize your data top down and bottom up. So you can create many small pieces of data, and then from those pieces create bigger structure. Or you can start with huge structure and then pick apart some parts of this huge structure into smaller ones. So it's super elastic. It's certainly way more elastic than Redux. It's reactive by default, so you can, it's super easy to react to some change. And after some data changes, you can just, for example, make it work this way. So that would automatically, for example, call some data, call some fetch to get data from the server, change something in this data and put it in your component. So reactivity is working fairly good by default. You have automatic async handling, automatic promises handling, so something that React is planning to implement. It works with suspense, which is really, really nice. So loading of data is just super comfortable. And there are just functions, no strings, no action creators, just use functions as you would use in your JavaScript code. And it's basic. It's, if you start with application with hooks and you have your local state with hooks and you start needing some bigger state management solution, it's just basically no cost switch from hooks. I'm going to show you that in just a minute or two. So it is a huge pro because it works almost in the same as React works, but it has way more features that React hooks by themselves are missing. And mostly with Jotai, you just write JS and React. So there is not that big difference between writing Jotai and React with hooks like you have with Redux, because with Redux, you just write totally different code. And there is just insane amount of integrations if you need some additional libraries added to your state management system. Simple API. So yeah, let's not talk about it. I'm just going to show you this API, and there is automatic. Can it work with class-based components? That's a good question. That's actually a good question. Can Jotai work with class-based component? And honestly, I don't know. Yeah, TypeScript support. So the first question was, can Jotai work with class-based components? I don't think so, because Jotai is connected with hooks. So I would assume it won't. It works only with functional components and hooks, but I'm not sure about it. This is my assumption. I did not try it with class-based components. So I think it does not work with class-based components, but I'm not sure about it. I would have to double check. And TypeScript support in Jotai is just there. So you can, I'm gonna show you code where I'm using Jotai with TypeScript. So it's basically done, it's basically created to work with TypeScript from the start, which is also a huge pro for me. It has integrations with Redux, React DevTools, and it has nice maintainers, because when I opened an issue in like few days ago, they replied to me in 2 or 3 hours, which was really nice. Cons, yeah, let me just close it quickly and go to code. So this is Jotai is less rigid than Redux. So you might like your Redux structure. Jotai is certainly more elastic than Redux. Not that many users as Redux. No single store by default. So also maybe you like your huge single state trees. It doesn't have it. And that's basically it for me, because, I think Jotai is just superior solution. So I do not see that many cons in this library. And now, as I said, let's go to something interesting already. So now we have code time, and yeah, I will just quickly go through 2. I hope we can cover at least 2 applications today. Yeah, I think we can manage that. Very simple applications, just to show you. Yep. Atoms in Jotai do not have the key property. Could this be a problem? So, Jalal, I hope I spelled your name correctly. Sorry if not. They do not have key property. Could this be a problem? I'm not sure how would you get the problem? If you mean, for example, using keys in collections, there are no problems, because every atom has this toString method that creates a unique identifier. So this is handled already, and I don't see any problems with Jotai not having key property. Compare old state with the new ones. Recall has key property for this. So yeah, Jotai is different in this area. Jotai works through object references. You do not create manual keys, you just have object references with Jotai if you want to compare old with new. So I don't think this is a different architecture decision. I don't think it's a problem. I've never seen this to be a problem. So that's my answer to the key property problem. Sure, thank you, Jalal. Okay, so let me close the chat again and go through the code quickly. I have 4 versions of this super simple application. I'll go through, let me see, probably 2 or 3 I'll start with Redux one. And I'm actually using Redux toolkit here because, as I said, this is the preferred way right now. You know, Redux creators say you should use Redux toolkit if you write any Redux. So this is done in TypeScript. Jotai will also be done in TypeScript. So the main difference that I want to focus on between Redux and Jotai is that with Redux, as you can see, you need to start with this whole configuration. So we create slice with a Redux toolkit, which is just a slice of data, part of our application's domain. So, oh, this is my bad. This should be a text named, and slices require you to, similarly like recoil requires you to name your atoms, to key your atoms. Redux requires you to name your slices. So whenever you want in Redux to create some new part of data, you start with your slice, you start with your initial state, you start with your actions written here in reducers field, and then you can use it. You can take the actions from your slice, you can configure store with it, and it's quite useful, especially in TypeScript, to create some additional functions like typed useSelector. So when I use useSelector in here, my application knows what is the state of my store already. So it's just easier to write selectors when you add these additional parts. And this is it. This is very small. So nothing big to analyze in here. And to write this simple application, hello developers, sure. You just need a few components, input. Whenever you want to dispatch an action, you call your dispatch. Whenever you want to access data, you call useSelector. And then you can easily, using these hooks, create your few components to make it work. And as you see, it works. Then I'm gonna open here just side by side. I'm gonna show you a Jotai solution. So the first thing, we have Redux on the left, we have Jotai on the right. And this is code that does basically the same thing. I just need, okay, cool. So the main difference, as you can see, is there is way less boilerplate. And if you want to create some data that is organized by Jotai and you want to read and write to your atoms, you just start with your atom and you say, this is my data. This is atom with text. Then if you want to drive some data, like in Redux version, to derive data with selectors. So most of your selectors will be combined with your components. In Jotai, it works a bit differently because you still have the same API. Mostly you will use still the same API, which might be matter of taste, but for me it's just super easy, because whenever I need to create a new piece of data, I will just say give me new atom. And if I want to refer to some other atom, give me value from this atom, and for example give me length, or create an uppercase version of this text. So the first thing which you might see already is that it's just less code, which for me is almost always a plus, because I can understand super easy what's going on in here. This is a piece of data. This is next piece of data, my text length atom, and this is next piece of data. And when I use these components, I just refer them by use atom. And as you can see, because I told you that there is a super easy switch from hooks to Jotai. So as you can see, this API, let me close the Redux version right now and focus on Jotai. So this API is basically like using useState. So I could do in here text set text, I could do a use state and start with some text with hello. That would be exactly the same thing, and the accessing the value and setting the new value works the same way as in your var state atom. So you can actually start writing your React application with your use state. And once you want, you can just switch to Jotai. And basically there is, for most of your components, you don't even need to change anything. You just need to switch from use state to use atom. So this is really, for me, this is a really huge pro that Jotai is actually more aligned with React API than Redux. It looks basically the same, works the same way. Let me see. Do you usually use atom to your own hooks? Say use text that returns something like, okay, so the question from Christian, do you abstract use atom to your own hooks? Well, it depends. It depends, because I could do the use text as described. So I could do, oh, sorry, yeah, here. I could create the, it feels to me that, okay, Bastian is writing something, but I could create such hook, but it depends actually on the occasion, on the particular case. I won't say, is it better to abstract use atom, or is it better to just access atoms directly? Because it depends on the case. If there is a situation where I need to, where I know that one component, for example, need to access a lot of other data sources, then it might be useful to abstract this to my own. Okay, I guess all of them will re-render if you put all the derived ones in one hook. So first I'm gonna answer to Christian, and later I'm gonna answer to Bastian. All of them will render if you put all of the derived ones in one hook. I'm not sure, Christian, about your question, because all of what would re-render if I put derived ones in one hook. Let me think about it. Use text that returns something straight. Well, still, if I create a hook like use text values, and it would do something like refer to all, for example, yeah, and I would like to, for example, do something like that. Okay, so basically answering your question, Christian, if I would like to do something like that with few atoms to actually collect those atoms into one and be able to put one atom in some component, I would probably use text values atom, and I would call it like that. So I would have a text that would, yeah, text atom, yeah, and then text length. Of course, this is not, this is example that I'm just based on the code I have in here. So I would create something like that to gather atoms into one structure regarding Christian question. And then I would probably, return here some kind of collected data. And then this atom would update whenever any of those changes. But for example, if the one changes, but the other does not change, only the one value, only the one value will be reread. So only what's necessary will be reread in here. Does that somehow answer your question, Christian? Because I'm not sure. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. It does. Great. And Bastian, regarding your question, let me go to the next application, and I will try to get back to your question about large-scale apps. Okay, because there are solutions in Jotai to handle large applications and large parts of data. So let me close this one. I just wanted to show you basic Jotai in comparison with basic Redux. Now I'm going to show you another example. And this one is super simple, also super simple application. What it does, it basically fetches the post from Hacker News by ID. And ID, you can see in here, this is 9001. And when I click on the arrow on the right side, it just goes to next post. And first, I'm going to do it differently right now. I'm going to show you Jotai first. And only after that, I'm going to show you Redux, because you already know a little bit of Jotai. So I think we can do it like that. So let me go to Jotai Hacker News example. Open my Jotai version. And basically, what I want to show you are a few things. The most important thing in this application is how Jotai handles promises and async code. So, as I said, this application will fetch posts from Hacker News, display it, and allow me to fetch next post, as you can see in here. What's really quite cool about Jotai is that when I create my fetch post function, my fetch post function is responsible, this function is responsible for just calling fetch on some Hacker News API. This is super easy. This is just JavaScript. It's not connected with Redux, with Jotai, with any library, with React, neither with React. So I just have some endpoint that will return me a promise, which is, obvious because this is how fetch works. And now in here, I create two atoms that are connected. I'm using this select atom API, which is under the hood still calling get on atom, but it makes the atoms composition sometimes a bit easier. So I just say, I have this atom, and this is my ID of the post, and I have select atom, and via select atom, I want to say, take post ID, and based on this post ID, just call fetch post. Just fetch post that will return you a promise. That's it. And basically, that's all the Jotai needs to handle async calls, to handle fetch calls. These five lines of code are enough for Jotai to make a call. Whenever I change the ID, it knows it should make a call. And what's also quite nice in here is that it has suspense, React suspense support built in. So for the time being of this new post being loaded, I just say, wrap it in suspense. And when you don't have data, say it's loading. So also, of course, it would require me to create more complicated code, but also I can use suspense to handle some failing promises, to automatically display some information that, okay, this has failed, and I will automatically avoid any errors, because that's what wrapping component in suspense does. So I just use promise. I tell Jotai, call this promise, give me the data, and when you don't have data, just use suspense to display some component saying about, telling the user about loading in here. So that's basically my whole Jotai code, what's interesting in it. And when I switch to Redux, well, it's fairly more complicated. I'm still using promises. I'll give you that. But preferred way of using it in Redux right now, let me just check the time. Okay, is using async functions. So I need to create this async func. I need to create my slice. I need to create my action that will change the post ID. Then I need to handle different states of my async func in here, which might be sometimes useful because you have, more detailed data. But but it's sad. Well, it's sad for me that as far as I know, there is no way to actually automatically use suspense with async functions. So I need to use this manual handling of the promise state. So as you know, I could use in Jotai, I could just use suspense and be done with it. Here, I need to check for my loading state directly, and only then I return, you know, my loading component. And also, what I need to do with my Redux application is that, as I said before, Redux does not have reactivity built in. So while in Jotai, I could just say, use this atom, and when you have new data, fetch post. In Redux, there are different ways to do it, but you need to do it somehow. And one of the ways is, you know, use effect whenever post ID changes, dispatch new action. And this is, you know, this is okay. I can do it, but still, this is just fairly more complicated than Jotai example. I just need to use another feature. I just need to use effect and make sure to, you know, put the proper property in here, and then get back to Redux cycle. So it works. I'm not saying it does not. I'm not saying it's bad per se, but for this case, it just fairly, you know, I need 20 something lines of code more to achieve the same simple thing. And you know, the functionality is just the same between those two pieces of code. And now I think I have like 12 minutes. So I would like to show you a little, and one more application. I hope I have still time to do it. If I don't have time, please yeah, so I'm just gonna go on. If I don't have time, if my time runs out, I hope somebody will tell me. So this is a simple application, and we had a question from Bastian about bigger applications, and that question I understand. So I will skip to do, because to do is, you know, everybody knows how to do works. I'm gonna show you other application, which actually is a little more complicated. And I'm gonna show you some nice Jotai features. I'm gonna do it in my last 5 minutes, and then I'll go to the summary. Let me open, it was focus atom example, exactly. So it's a quite big file, but let's see what it does. So it shows you some meals. It shows you a burger, it shows you French fries, it shows you salad. So it might be a part of some application to order food. It shows the prices of those meals, amount, and yeah, okay, exactly, amount and summary. So we have basically 4 different components. We have 3 different meals, so 3 different components of meal, and then we have one summary. And of course, we need to have all this data somehow connected. So let's start. What data structure do we have in here? We have a basic food list. So this is our data structure, which is bigger than the data structures I shown you before. We have 3 meals, we have name, price, amount. And because Jotai, in what I showed you, all the atoms were small. Right now, we have huge atom. We start with a huge atom. So I will just create an atom with all these with all these meals in a list. And then what's quite interesting about Jotai is that I can create an item list. So item list is using the whole list. And as you can see, I have this food list atom in here. Yeah, the one. And I map over it as I would do to display some details about each meal. And what's interesting thing happens in here, especially in this line. Okay, just yeah, in line. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. I need to close it. Sorry for that. There is some problem with my editor, but I think I'm back. Sorry for that. So let's get back. So I have this, as you have seen before, I have a list of meals, and then I have this nice function called split atom. And what split atom does it takes the list and it creates an atom for each of the elements. So when I go to item detail, which is my component, this is my item detail, my component to display one meal. I take atom in here, I consume an atom in here, and with this atom, here I can behave like I would have, like I'm having a local data in here. So I just have direct access, not only have direct access to data, which is of course food name, food price, food amount, I also have direct access to changing only this one little part of my data. So Jotai knows how to split my huge data structure, my list, into smaller data structures and tell me, okay, let's create a function to change amount, for example, of each of your meals. This is a bit of code to that, but to go through it quickly, interesting part of this code is focus atom and then take property amount. So basically it says, you know, from this bigger data structure, I care only about the amount property. And using this helper that says, okay, I only care about amount property, I get back to my component and I have this simple API to set amount property. And as you can see, whenever I change my amount property locally, it also updates the summary. So from this big list, basic food list, I can get really into smaller components. And in those smaller components, update my atom as I wish. But I also, from the same atom, I can create a summary. And I have here food list, and I can produce any kind of data I want. So I can create total price in here. I can map over this food list and display each meal separately. And still, in here, in summary component, I have access to my whole food list data structure through this food list atom. But in my item detail component, I have access to my smaller atom, that is a focused atom, that allows me to behave as I would keep this data locally. But even though I behave as it's kept locally, it's still being synchronized with the whole bigger data structure, and both local component and the whole summary will update whenever it should. So this is, I hope, Bastian, at least partially answered to your question about large scale apps. It means to work in large scale apps. Let me see the chat. Okay, yeah, thank you. Of course, once you go into bigger applications, it's not that easy as you know, as in the simple examples. Can we have the last code source? Of course, I will just, the code source is basically stolen. So I will just share with you from the Jotai showcase exactly. And I think it's was it here or was it not? Okay, you know what? Then I need to cheeseburger. Okay, so I think I probably have it just to. Okay, so I have stolen that code from some Jotai examples. I have it. I surely have, yeah, code sandbox with it. It's here. Yeah, exactly. That's this example. So I'm just going to paste into the chat. So this is the last application, fully working. So you can just take it and analyze it by yourself. And that's basically it. I would actually love to show you to other applications, but the time is up. And I showed you just enough Jotai to get you interested. I hope I showed you that even though the API is small and the basic examples were very small, you still can create bigger structures with it, and it still stays reactive, and it still stays elegant and easy to use. And that was basically my idea for today. So let me just open for a little bit. Oh, my presentation left me. So yeah, let me go back. Yeah, so I was here. We had a little sum up. That was it. And if you think that, thank you so much, Sami. If you think that, I was wrong somewhere, because I might have been wrong, it's super possible, or you want to chat some more, or you actually want to know, yeah, okay, slides. I think I can do slides, but Bastian, if you could please write me an email, because I cannot share the slides with you right now. I need to export them. So if you could write an email, I will share slides with you. And to all of you, if you want to get in touch, if you want to ask some more questions, yeah, just write me. I will be more than glad to chat with you about any of the topics that are written down here, and any other topics. I hope I showed you something interesting. And we had some questions through the presentation, so I don't know if we have any more questions and if we have time for more questions. Do we have someone in here who could tell me if we still have time for questions, or should I just wrap it up?
Yes, we have time.
Okay, so if we have any other questions, if you want to write them in chat, or if you want to speak up, we still might have some time. If I answered your questions through the presentation, then that will be it. Yeah, I think we're good. So yeah, please, if you have any more questions, just write me. I'll be super glad to chat with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this webinar.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Bye.